Sara Wolff, and I'm an alternative folk musician and songwriter. And I'm from Norway, but I've been based in Liverpool for the past 6 years. I came to Liverpool to study music, and now I'm here and I've sort of, I guess, established myself a little bit as an artist in Liverpool, and now I'm here in Warrington. I think I started writing music for myself when I was around 12 years old. So I've always looked at myself as a writer. And then once I learned how to play guitar, and there was one summer when I was really bored, because before that I used to play violin. And then I was really bored and I wanted to play an instrument that was just a bit easier to write with. I learned how to play guitar, and that's when I started writing as a solo artist. And then back home in Bergen, I did start to play a little bit of shows. I was in a different band that was more like electronic based. It was like an electronic duo. But it was first when I moved to Liverpool that I really started establishing myself and looking at myself as a solo artist, I think.
I watched the world turn, shaking the leaves of the trees, leaving the ground bare until the winter came by. I took it all off as I noticed the grey in your eyes, eyes wide open.
So my EP, When You Left the Room, we started recording that right before lockdown happened, and it was during lockdown that we were trying to finish it and trying to finish recording it. So I had to record all my vocals in my bedroom with like the dogs barking outside, because everyone had bought dogs in lockdown. To make anything happen, you just sort of have to just do it yourself. So I made 2 of my own music videos, one with a friend and one, well, all with help from friends and housemates during lockdown, with like a projector in my living room. And so I had to teach myself how to edit music videos, and I've always loved, music production and recording myself. So it's also really fun to learn more about that side of things as well. And I think generally just being a solo artist is, the best thing about it is just being able to do so many different creative things at once. Like, I'm not just writing music, I'm also thinking about like the whole visual aspect of videos and photography, and also even like marketing and like social media work and everything. It's just so many jobs into one, and I really like it because it's like loads of different ways of expressing myself.
Is it very different from being in a band where you might have to take lots of collective decisions, or you kind of have to have the final say on everything?
Yeah, I think it's a blessing and a curse, because I've never actually been in a traditional band as such. I know the way I want my music to sound like, because I've got such a vision for what it's meant to look like and sound like. I think it probably could have been a little bit challenging. It's also a lot of pressure, because I have the responsibility to, do all the marketing and to push it. And if I was in a band with 5 people who all had like a say and all, put in all the money, we'd have 5 times as much money, and probably like 5 times as many listeners as well, I think, because we have more people to pull and more people to push in and get out there. But I still think it's, for this project at least, this is the way I like to do it. It's just a little bit more challenging, I think, when you first start. Yeah, for the past 6 years I've almost only played with a band because I just really like to play the songs in the way they were sort of produced and the way I thought about them, and I feel like I always get pigeonholed into this like solo acoustic act just because I'm a woman with a guitar. So a lot of the time that's what people expect. And you know, it's not just like folk music, there's a lot more to it, and I have a bigger vision for, you know, what the bass is going to sound like and what the drums are going to do. And so I've been playing with a band a lot, and it was just this summer that I went on a solo tour by myself, sometimes with one other instrumentalist, and I played all the songs completely reimagined with a cassette machine. So I got to use some backing tracks as well, but it was quite fun. So I think I'm starting to sort of see that I can play the songs in loads of different ways, and in that way it never gets old either. You know, I've got loads of different ways of playing each song, whether that's solo or with two people or with a cassette machine or with the whole band, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Do you think it's harder as a solo female musician?
I definitely think it is. People have a lot of expectations to women and what they're meant to sound like, and I also think you just have to prove yourself and your capabilities a lot more when it comes to, you know, sound engineers like fiddling with your amp or like not expecting me to know how.
Oh, thinking they know better.
Yeah, or like expecting me to not know about my own gear, for example. And you know, so there's always like tiny little challenges, or people not expecting me to, you know how to record my own music or produce it, or so there's always like tiny little barriers that you have to face as a woman in music, I think. Yeah, so I think the best way for me to battle that is just to learn as much as I can, you know, and because I love it and I just want to know every aspect of what's going on and try not to get annoyed.
Yeah, because in terms of genre, it's been described as quite folky, but also there's quite unusual noises in there with distorted guitars.
Yeah.
It's not any one particular genre really, is it? It's you expressing yourself.
I very often find it really hard to describe my own music because, like you said, it's not just one genre, and I call it alternative folk just because I feel like that, because it does have like a folk root or like a core of, you know, storytelling, I think, and the lyrics are very, very important to me, and the lyrics are what I usually write first and what I build the songs from. But you know, someone said it's, and I always like to ask people what they think because I'm still unsure of what to say, but I think if I was a man, I'd probably be people would probably say that it was, you know, more like alternative, like I guess more like rock. But yeah, no, it's hard to sort of decide, because I've got influences from, you know, folk music to like loads heavier stuff, or like I've always been very into like prog rock, and which I think is also quite a cool way of looking at it, or like Radiohead, or more electronic things and more experimental like psychedelic things as well. And I think apart from that sort of intimate and storytelling side of the music, I also like to surprise people when it comes to, you know, changing the dynamics of a song quickly, or adding an unexpected instrument, or adding a really heavy bit just when people have started, you know, relaxing, falling asleep. So yeah, I'm just playing around, and I think it's easy to, I think, coming from a music scene where, you know, a lot of people are doing really well and a lot of people are playing a certain genre, I think it's easy to feel a little bit disheartened by, you know, feeling like I should do one thing because that's the successful genre or the you know, the smart way of doing things. But I always just want to play around, and that's the most important thing for me. It's just playing around and just doing, just writing what I want and just mashing all together. And even if it doesn't make sense in the beginning, it's still my voice and my storytelling, and that's sort of the thread that goes throughout it all, I think.
Just like the choice between your artistic integrity or just selling out and doing what might be commercial. Yeah,
and you see a lot of young people always stressing about, you know, writing the next hit, and especially with, you know, social media like TikTok and things like that on the rise. You see a lot of music written for social media, when social media is meant to be, you know, your way to share it. And I think, it's just easy to fall into that trap, and I'm just always trying to hold myself back and you know, just remember why I like to write music, and just have fun with it.
Sounds like you want people to take their time and not just kind of consume it.
And that's it. And that's also the way I like to consume music. And I think, if my music's like a painting, then it might take a bit longer for people to see it or to get it. And I think that's absolutely fine. And I'm not in a rush.
What tends to come first, whether is it the melody, is it the story or the lyrics, or is it the sonic effect you're trying to create with different contrasts of instruments? It's always been the lyrics first for me. Whenever I go about my day, I always collect little words or sentences that sort of pop into my head, or I see something and I'm like, whether that's, you know, like just a little word I see or a sentence or something that I hear or just a feeling I have, I try to just collect it all in my notes app on my phone or in, you know, different notebooks, and then I guess separately I'm noodling on the guitar or, you know, producing something on my computer, and then sometimes I put them together, or I put together a poem of words and add music and melody on top of that. I think that's normally the way I do things, but I do try to change it up a bit. Like Cotton Socks, that's one of the songs from my previous EP. I started that song with a bass riff, so that was because I'd never written from the bass before, and I think as a guitarist, you know, I've played a lot of bass since, but when I wrote that initially, I wasn't, you know, I didn't play like a bassist. I played it more like a guitarist, if that makes sense. So it started with this really nice little melody, and that was the building block of the whole song. And I think trying to change it up will then just kind of, I guess, rip you out of your comfort zone, and suddenly something completely different will happen. But other times I just sit down and a song just kind of falls out. And I don't know if you've had the same kind of feeling when you just sit down and you just write it all out, or, you know, it's just kind of there in your head and you just put it down on the paper, and it's like you kind of just picked it from the sky and put it down, and there it was. So it's all different. I just try to change it up a bit, but it's always the lyrics first, and I think that's also the same when I listen to music. Lyrics are what kind of makes it or breaks it for me. I noticed you've been doing quite a few, well, you talked earlier about using your cassette loops and things like that, and you've been doing some quite interesting shows in lots of unusual places, including here. So how did that kind of come about, your doing different shows in unusual places?
So my friend Abby, she runs, my friend and my housemate and collaborator Abby, she runs a promotion company called Bed and Breakfast Live Music. And she started that as a way to put music in unusual spaces where you normally wouldn't see music. And, you know, living together and sort of always supporting each other, doing our own things. She studied music management where I studied music. It just made sense for us to sort of, work together. So we did a tour of unusual spaces, or unconventional spaces across England. So we played in the bookshop in Bristol, we played in an arts gallery in Liverpool, what the Bridewell is called, and we played, all sorts of little places. It definitely turned out to be more challenging than we thought, just because, you know, because we didn't have a big budget. When you put music into a space that normally don't do music, they don't have the infrastructure for a gig. So, you know, you have to figure out how to get a PA and, you know, all of these things that you don't think about when you just, you know, use normal music venues. So it was definitely really challenging, and we did end up having to add some more conventional gigs in. But the main goal for that tour was just to reach out to everyone we knew across the country, because during lockdown I made a lot of connections online over like Instagram with other artists like in the same ballpark as me, and it was a really nice opportunity to collaborate with other artists and just meet people, and it turned out really lovely. I played this strange philosophy festival in Hay-on-Wye in Wales, which is really, really nice, with, you know, a lot of very intellectual people and organic babies everywhere. And it was great fun. But, because you asked about the cassette machine, didn't you?
Is that you on your own? Or
so that's on my own. Just when I played with a cassette machine, I think it just adds a little bit more than if I were to play on my own, because I don't think just my voice and the guitar really shows what I like to do or what my music sounds like. So what I did, I took some of the stems from my music projects and pulled them in, so I have a drum machine. So it's a 4-track cassette machine, so I have a drum machine, then I added a bass, and then like a few of the synths from my demos. But nothing too wild, and all pretty simple and quiet, but just to add that little extra, those little elements that kind of made it more interesting. And it worked really well, and it's also a bit of a novelty, you know, being able to sort of mix it yourself on stage, and people really liked it.
And you've also collaborated with a dance artist, is that right? You've composed a score?
So I collaborated with this choreographer in London called Teresa, who needed some music for one of her dance projects. It was a performance at a dance festival down in London in May. So I composed like a half an hour piece for that, which is really, really interesting. But I couldn't be there for the performance, but I did see the video afterwards, and that was very interesting, because it was a whole different way of approaching music. And I think, you know, when you're not building the instruments like underneath words, but it's underneath like movement instead. So it's really cool, and it gave me a whole new perspective on it, because all I had was a video from the rehearsal, and then I just had to sit and sort of play in real time to their movements, but not get in the way.
What can people expect from your live show with your full band?
So we've played together for probably as long as I've been in Liverpool, and so I play with a bassist and a drummer and a guitarist as well. And yeah, it is really different from when I play by myself. For a long time I tried to make the music that I play live sound as close to the recordings as possible. So that's what I would say before, that it sounds like the recordings. And it still does in many ways. So if you check out the recordings on Spotify, for example, that would be a good starting point. But for the new things, for the new music, because I'm releasing new music, I'd say even though it's a full band, it's still quite intimate. The drummer Andrew, he plays a lot more with his fingers than he plays with sticks. So it's quite intimate, but at the same time quite dynamic. So because we do have some really loud bits as well, and some of the songs are definitely way heavier than the old stuff. So I feel like I'm slowly finding my niche a bit more through recording, but also playing live. But I guess you have to come to the museum to figure out.
Tell me who you think about now. Tell me who you think about now. Tell me who you think about.
Yeah, so I've got a new EP that's being released in May, so I'm going to start releasing the singles. So I recorded some live videos for 2 of the singles in the Geology Museum, just right down this way. Is that way? It's that way. And yeah, it was a really, really cool experience. We all had a really great time. I think it just added a really, really interesting element to the recordings, but also, visually, but also to the sound, because when you play in an unconventional space, you have to sort of adapt the way you play and the way you interact with the space. And that really came through in the recordings, and I'm very happy with it.